So CNN's Caitlin Collins caught U.S. Senator J.D. Vance in a little bit of a trap live on air yesterday when she pointed out the double standard in his opinion when it comes to January 6th versus the recent college campus protests. I'm not going to waste any of your time. Let's jump into this.
But you can't police people for being anti-Israel or pro-Israel. You can police people for violating the law, and we have seen some of that with some of these protests.
Okay, so you agree that people who break in and vandalize a building should be prosecuted?
Exactly.
Okay, I'm just checking because you did help raise money for people who did so on January 6th, which was, impeding an official proceeding, breaking into a building that they weren't allowed to be in, and vandalizing the Capitol.
Well, Caitlin, I know that this is the obsession of the national media to talk about what happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago on January the 6th.
It's not an obsession. I'm just seeing if it's a double standard.
Let me answer the question, Caitlin. I mean, look, here's been my basic argument about January the 6th. If you beat up a cop, of course, you deserve to go to prison. If you violated the law, you should suffer the consequences. But there are people who protested on January the 6th who have had the complete weight of the Justice Department thrown at them when, at worst, they're accused of misdemeanors. Now, again, there are people who are accused of worse offenses, and that's a problem. But you can't have Black Lives Matter protesters who rioted and vandalized go free when you have people who were actually peacefully protesting on January the 6th who have the book thrown at them. That's the double standard that I'm most worried about.
Yeah, I don't think there's an obsession with January 6th, but it is a legitimate question. And given what you just said there, and as Trump is getting closer to, as he's a presumptive Republican nominee, he has said he would pardon, it's considered a blanket pardon for everyone on January 6th. Are you saying that shouldn't happen? People who beat up cops should be excluded from that?
Well, I think what President Trump has said, and of course he can speak for himself, but I pay pretty close attention to what he says. And I think what the president has said is that people who have this double standard applied to them should be pardoned.
Now, I have more clips to play for you, but I just want to break down a few things here. Firstly, notice how J.D. Vance completely downplays Donald Trump's words on the January 6th insurrectionists. Vance thinks that Trump simply wants to pardon anybody who had this double standard applied to them, but Donald Trump has repeatedly said, free all of the hostages, the so-called hostages, including the people charged for seditious conspiracy, including the Proud Boys. He wants to pardon everybody that was there on January 6th and that was charged en masse. He doesn't want to target people that had this double standard applied to them. J.D. Vance also says that the media has some sort of obsession with January 6th, which even if they do, I think that's pretty justified to be obsessed over the first time the peaceful transfer of power was broken in U.S. history, and the fact that the person who directly led to the peaceful transfer of power being broken is the frontrunner in the Republican Party and their presumptive nominee. I have another clip of J.D. Vance trying to downplay the threat to Mike Pence's life on January 6th and saying that he wasn't really in trouble, and Caitlin Collins rightfully points out that Mike Pence would disagree. But Caitlin Collins also slips this in there, but something really important is that Donald Trump never called Mike Pence to see if he was okay. I'm not even sure if they've talked since January 6th. Play this clip.
The question fundamentally for our country is, do we want 4 more years of Joe Biden, or do we want 4 more years of the peace and prosperity of Donald Trump? That, to me, is an easy question.
The last time I checked, President Biden wasn't approving of the chance to hang his vice president and did not call his vice president when their life was in danger on Capitol Hill, something that Mike Pence himself has testified to. So my question is, does it give you any pause to be his vice president, given how he has treated Mike Pence?
Caitlin, I'm extremely skeptical that Mike Pence's life was ever in danger. I think in politics, people like to really exaggerate things from time to time.
I know a lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Senator.
A lot of folks in the Democratic Party, Caitlin, act as if January the 6th was the scariest moment of their lives. I think, look, January 6th was a bad day. It was a riot. But the idea that Donald Trump endangered anyone's lives when he told them to protest peacefully, it's just absurd. And the entire legal basis of this prosecution of Donald Trump from Jack Smith.
But they were chanting that they wanted to hang him.
Look, Caitlin, did a few people say some bad things? Sure, but do we blame Donald Trump for every bad thing that's ever been said by a participant in American democracy. I think that's an absurd standard.
JD Vance really is a Republican congressman, because notice how slippery his wording is here when he answers some of these questions. I want to debunk everything he just said. Firstly, he said a lot of people act like January 6th was the scariest day. Yeah, it's pretty scary to see your democracy hanging on by a thread while they are certifying the election results for the opposing candidate, and while the candidate in power is directly stoking the flames of what is happening. Then he says, did a few people say some bad things? You can't blame it on Trump every time someone says something bad. But in this case, yes, you can blame all of this on Donald Trump. You can draw a direct line from Donald Trump's rally at the Ellipse, his rhetoric leading up to January 6th, the months before, saying the election would be rigged, to his speech at the Ellipse, to the people walking from the Ellipse to the Capitol with their MAGA gear on, and then trying to stop that peaceful transfer of power, trying to make sure that Mike Pence doesn't certify Joe Biden's win, and then Donald Trump on Truth Social saying Mike Pence is our last stand. And then at the rally he said effectively something like Mike Pence can't fail our democracy today. So then when these people go to the Capitol and start chanting hang Mike Pence, yes, that is directly Donald Trump's fault. And now it's no wonder why Mike Pence refuses to endorse Donald Trump despite being his former vice president. I'm going to play a clip of Biden making a joke about that, then I'm going to play another clip of Caitlin Collins and JD Vance.
Age is the only thing we have in common. My vice president actually endorses me.
Standard. And look, Caitlin, I know you're worried, and I think justifiably so, about
this isn't about me,
threats
Senator.
to
I'm
American...
asking questions about you and how you
look,
would feel about this.
I'm trying to answer the question. I appreciate if you let me. We know that there are threats to American democracy. I think the biggest threat to American democracy, Caitlin, is that the Biden administration is trying to prevent Donald Trump from campaigning and taking his case to the American people, even as they hide their own candidate.
That's presiding over that case. The Biden administration is not preventing Donald Trump from campaigning. He just did two campaign events tonight.
This is a really important point, Caitlin. Who is the number 3 person from the Biden Department of Justice who went to work for the New York prosecutor just months before he brought this case against Donald Trump? You can't have people moving from the Biden administration to prosecute Donald Trump in New York and say it has nothing to do with the Biden administration, especially when the judge is the Biden administration donor.
Attorneys go from the Justice Department to local DA's offices all the time. That's not that unusual. I mean, you're an attorney, you know that.
It's pretty
unusual. You probably have colleagues who went to Yale with you that did that.
I'm not going to lie, Caitlin Collins is rolling through JD Vance in this interview. She's doing a great job. Leave a like and a comment if you agree. But I also want to point out that, firstly, Donald Trump was indicted by a grand jury who looked at all of the evidence. This had nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with the Biden administration. Secondly, Donald Trump is campaigning in the middle of his trials. It's not the other way around. They're not purposefully placing trials while he's campaigning. That doesn't make any sense. And lastly, it's insane to me that people still say that the Biden administration is the biggest threat to democracy, when on the other side, we have people like Donald Trump who say that he wants to be a day one dictator. He wants to terminate the Constitution. We have Project 2025 looming over the U.S. and trying to further democratic backsliding. We have Donald Trump wanting to pull us out of NATO. We have Donald Trump weakening these alliances we've spent decades building. Even one of the people that works closely with Project 2025 floated the idea of repealing the 22nd Amendment, which says that no person can hold the office of president for more than 2 terms. And Donald Trump genuinely wants to entrench his power through extra legal means. I mean, we saw this on January 6th, or we saw this actually leading up to January 6th when Donald Trump tried to pressure different election officials into finding votes. When John Eastman came up with this unconstitutional legal theory that Mike Pence could flip the results of the election. I mean, I could go on for hours about how much the Trump administration is a threat to democracy, but then you have Republicans who say that Biden is senile, and then in the next breath they'll say that he is a major threat to democracy. He's going to end America as we know it. It's just absolutely insane to me. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, comment a blue heart if you made it this far, subscribe. Most importantly, have a great Thursday, everybody.